Atl Utd Fan TV, 1-0 loss for the third straight match, and we are out of the MLS's back tournament. Of course, it was always going to be a tall order against Columbus Crew, but yeah, I mean, pretty lackluster in all of the performances. So yeah, Tanner, what'd you think?
I mean, it was another poor performance. I think there was a little bit of bright spots, in the second half, especially at the beginning of the second half. You had, why am I forgetting? You had Gallagher come on, and he looked decent. Bit of spring in his legs and a desire to go forward, and he was playing left center back, which was weird, but whatever. But still, you couldn't find a final product. You couldn't find a final ball. You couldn't find a way to get it into the box and create a shot that wasn't a slow roller directly at the keeper. And, it was another lackluster performance and a long string of lackluster performances that, if you look on the whole of Frank de Boer's tenure so far at Atl Utd, this is what you get most of the time. I mean, even when you had Joseph Martinez last year, you had boring slugfest games where you eventually found a goal and happy days. And then you had a decent period for about, month to 6 weeks where you won 2 trophies and then you fell off a cliff again. And then you lost at home to a team you should have beaten. And, you go into preseason and you lose more of your talented players that have really gotten you to where you are. And, from some accounts, the way that those departures were handled wasn't handled maybe as gracefully as you would have liked and tactfully as you would have liked to see from a club with the standard of Atl Utd. And you have players come in, and then you see the attempt to play the same system that was attempted to be played at the beginning of last year. But again, you have large roster turnover, so you don't even have the continuity from one year to the next to continue building. You have to restart again, but you've lost pieces of that puzzle that were almost irreplaceable. And you're trying to play a system with players that basically square pegs round holes all over the place. And I saw a really interesting point that said, when every player in the team looks bad, there's a problem within the team itself. Like, there's a problem with the team as a whole. And I think that's absolutely apparent because every player looks bad. No player looks good. PT Martinez looks awful. He's losing the ball all the time. His body language is terrible. PT Martinez is a fantastic player. He's won things at a high level in Argentina. He was well regarded as a player. He is not as bad as he has been in Atlanta. And I get that that's hard for people to believe given the performances. But I think that he hasn't been put in a position to succeed as well. Ezequiel Barco has just been inconsistent at best. Like, I always talk about how I think he should be worth $30 million. I can't keep saying that because I haven't seen that development continue because he isn't put in a position to succeed. A good manager takes the tools he is given and does the best he can with them. And sometimes that means taking your ego and your ideology to one side because you don't have – if you have Legos to build – the Millennium Falcon, you can't go and build something from Harry Potter because you don't have the right stuff to do that. If you don't have the parts to put in a Ferrari to make it go fast, you can't do it with a beater. Like, you can't just take the parts out of an old Volkswagen, stick it in a Ferrari and expect it to work. It's not going to. And right now, what you have with Frank de Boer and what you have with this system, which isn't a system because no one knows what they're doing, so I can't say how there's an actual system in effect here. He's trying to get these players to play in a system that they do not have the capabilities to play in. Now, that's not their fault. They all have their talents in certain areas, but you have to put those talents together to work well. And that has not happened. That has barely happened at any point in time since Frank de Boer has been manager at Atl Utd. Now, one thing I will say, and which is kind of funny for me, and I don't want to be a smug asshole, but I'm not yelling and screaming, going, fire everybody and yada, yada. Like, obviously, I'm frustrated. I've been talking for a few minutes on this, AJ. Probably not going to get another question in because this is just how I'm going to rant. But I kind of saw this coming. And I wrote an article in February saying exactly the same thing that everyone else is saying right now. It was apparent then. It was apparent last season. And we say, okay, we had last season. Let's see if we can build off that and get better. And now Frank de Boer is not the only one who deserves criticism for this, by the way, because as a front office, you had to know this is what you were getting, because this is what it's always been in terms of how he's played. Like, his teams have always been not gung-ho, attacking, creative, the fun, energetic stuff you saw in their Tata. That's not how he plays. So you should have known that. So that's mistake number one from the front office. Number two, if you are going to buy into DeBoer and the way that he plays his system, you need to make sure you're doing everything in your power to sign players that have the traits, the qualities, or the potential to develop those qualities that fit the system he is trying to play. You can't just go and get players that would fit in a Tata Martino system and expect them to work for Frank DeBoer. You can't expect players who maybe aren't technically and tactically proficient to work in a system that requires them to be very intelligent with how they play, as opposed to just playing off the cuff and being more engineering and logical, as opposed to being more artistic and creative and just going with what you feel, which, there's a big difference in the two of them. And I feel like you're trying to be an engineer with artistic players sometimes right now, and it's just not going to work. You're not going to get someone who's a mechanical engineer to paint the Mona Lisa. It ain't going to happen. So I think for me, the frustrating thing is that none of this should be surprising to people. This is what we have. And this is a challenge for the club, because you clearly have a structure that's very difficult to work within, which is MLS, but you've done it successfully once already, and you've shown that. You've shown you can build a competitive team. You've shown you can scout high-quality players and play attractive football, which is why you have the records you have, why the club is held in such high regard. But right now needs to be a serious period of self-reflection, because they have probably another month off and then a few more games. I don't think Frank DeBoer should be sacked right now, although there is a lot of arguments for that to happen because you have time to maybe go find someone. But I think that given what's happening with COVID, it's very difficult to find someone, bring them in. Yes, you have a lot of time to work on the training ground, and that's great and ideal, but how are you really going to find someone to move right now? It's just very difficult. So I don't see how they can sack DeBoer right now and get anyone in that will make anything any better. That being said, with whatever happens with the regular season, you have to see how he continues to develop with his team. If the body language is still horrible, the football is still terrible, you're not getting results, and it's awful. Okay, then at the end of the season, you just say, all right, it didn't work. We have to move on. Yeah. But you don't want it to get that bad. And I think that's the other thing. I don't want to come off as like smug saying, I told you so. I mean, obviously, yeah, I did. But the point is that I would rather be wrong and Atlanta United be winning than be right and Atlanta United be terrible. And right now, Atlanta United, this is the worst we've been. I mean, in our short existence, this is the worst we've had. And it was going to happen at some point in time. And obviously, it's frustrating as hell. But it makes you appreciate the winning more. But also, I think the good thing to see is that people are frustrated and they are putting their voices out there and saying they're annoyed. And that means that the fans are holding the club to a high standard. And that has to continue to happen. Yeah.
And so, in our conversations, I think this will be our last point. Like when Frank DeBoer was hired, like right before when it was being rumored and whatnot, you said to me, one of his things is his stubbornness, that Dutch stubbornness. And so far, by playing the same system, by playing, largely the same formation in 3-4-3, at least to start, you definitely had to kind of throw the kitchen sink in the second half to maybe change it up. But yeah, I mean, we've all kind of at least thought of this, prognosticated. At least there are these things creeping in before we even sign the guy. And so the fact of the matter is, when you see that playing out, it's really disheartening because there are some preventable things that
well, I mean, and even now, if people want to go back and look at my original Transfer Daily update that we did the day when the DeBoer first came out, I was skeptical in that very first video because I understood who his mentor was with Louis van Gaal. I went through that experience of how he handled things, his arrogance, his unwillingness to change. Louis van Gaal at least won the FA Cup, and there were things that were getting, some people said it was being built. It was horrible football, though. It was terrible. At Man United, at Manchester United. And Frank DeBoer is a disciple of Louis van Gaal. He very much subscribes to his theory. He was his mentor. And, even talking to people who, when I used to work at the team store, I had people come in from the Netherlands, and I asked them, they were Ajax fans, and I asked them about DeBoer. And, they said, yeah, we won, but it was never that enjoyable. It was 1-0, 2-0. It wasn't like you were blowing things out and playing expressive football the way that they were used to. And I think that's telling from someone who saw him lift 4 league titles with them, which is really, really impressive. But, I think you're beginning to see an evidence, of his inconsistencies at his jobs after that, where things just haven't gone well. And, I think, unfortunately, you're seeing a bit of a situation develop right now in Atlanta as well. But, yeah, I was skeptical from the very beginning. And, it's not shocking when things are playing out the way that they are, and you're seeing the type of football that we are. But, thankfully, in a way, this whole thing at the end of the day is a bit of a write-off. And if you really, the thing is that it can be a real positive if Indiana decide, this isn't working. We've realized that through this. Then maybe them moving on, and we can take this as a positive. Because honestly, if the club moves on from Frank DeBoer and they bring in a manager that changes things around, will you really be that upset that Atlanta United lost 1-0 3 times in the MLS back tournament that no one's ever going to care about? Probably not. So, at the end of the day, we have to trust, that they're going to do the right thing. And, that's difficult right now because it feels like, that it's not going to get better. But, we've done it once and they've built it from scratch. So now there's a bit of a foundation. Let's see what they can put on top of it.
All right, Tanner, appreciate the time, and we'll talk to you later.